We're faced with thousands of decisions every day. Coke or Pepsi? Boxers or briefs? Wake up for an early morning run or hit the snooze button? Continue watching a video on the internet or hitting the escape button? No matter what decision you have to make, the more information you have, the better the decision. This is especially true when it comes to our energy needs in the future. Our energy demands in the United States and globally are growing every year. And in order to make sure that we have sustainable solutions, we need to think about going green. Now, there are many different ways to go green, but for this talk, I'm going to focus on 4 different sources: solar cells, wind power, biomass, and nuclear technology. And I'm going to look at the negative and positive aspects of using those different sources, and the full environmental impact of those sources. Because it's not important to just look at the end product, but rather the entire life cycle of whatever source you're going to choose to use. Let's start with solar power. Solar power is produced when the sun rays rain down on the earth and they're harnessed by solar panels. And because the sun is not going to burn out for about 90 million years or so, it's going to be pretty consistent. But did you ever stop to think about the wildlife that's affected? I mean, let's say you and your friends are out sunbathing, maybe thinking of a way to not take a bath, and someone just sticks a solar cell in front of you. That'd be pretty annoying. And the same thing happens when it comes to the plants and animals where solar cells are usually placed. But then you also have to think about what kind of energy is used to produce those solar cells, and it's usually not renewable sources. And because solar cells don't work when the sun's not out, often that energy has to be stored in batteries. Now, those batteries are made with metals that have to be mined. And that's because you're not seeing the mines doesn't mean that those areas aren't affected. And then when those batteries need to be disposed, you have to think of the toxic elements that are inside of those batteries. Let's talk about wind power. Wind power happens when wind comes by and turns these turbine blades that you see in this photo. Again, you have to think of the wildlife that's affected. I mean, let's say you're a bird, let's say any bird, maybe a seagull, and you're flying around, and all of a sudden someone smacks you in the face with a turbine blade. That wouldn't be a lot of fun. Birds and bats are often struck with turbine blades. And, as stated before, there's only an optimal wind range in which most turbines can work. Otherwise, their power has to be stored in batteries. Again, the negative impacts of the toxicity from the batteries and the mining that has to occur. And often with wind power, you're also looking at heavy metal. No, not music, but toxic elements or toxic metals that are especially harmful and often cancerous. Let's talk about biomass. Biomass is often produced with landfill waste. So all that food that's not being eaten, you're in good luck. It's actually being used to power and heat homes. So that's one good effect. That being said, you have to also think of our homeboys, I want to call them, our furry homeboys, known as mice, insects, all those little animals that we don't think about. Now, how would you like it if you're at home, you're cooking, and all of a sudden, someone takes down your house, chops it up, and throws it in an oven. You wouldn't like that, would you? And that's what we're doing to those animals, our furry homeboys. But then you have to also think of the amount of energy that goes into manufacturing that extra agricultural material. We're talking about water. We're talking about extra fertilizer. And that has to go somewhere. And if you're downstream of the fertilizer that's being used, then you're going to be adversely affected. Finally, let's talk about nuclear power. I'm sorry to disappoint you in the audience, but you actually cannot see an Easter egg of Homer Simpson in there. Don't look, he's not there. Mr. Burns also not present. Now let's think about the wildlife that's affected with nuclear power. Nuclear power is generated when molecules are split and used to heat up water. When that water is heated up, it's often dumped back into waters, lakes, and other waterways. Now, how would you like it if you're at home, taking a shower, maybe singing a little bit, and then all of a sudden, someone dumps hot water on you, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, like we use in the United States? You wouldn't like that, would you? No, you wouldn't. Then we have to think about where that material is going to come from to make the nuclear power. It's often coming from mines again, and those areas where the mines are made are adversely affected. And finally, you have to think of the storage when it comes to nuclear power. That nuclear waste has to be stored somewhere and has to be transported somehow. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of having nuclear waste in my backyard. So you have to really think, as a wise philosopher once said, it's not easy being green. It's not. But when you're armed with better information, you'll be able to make better decisions. So before you go out and start rallying behind what sort of renewable energy source you want to use for yourself and advocate for, make sure that you have the best information so you can make the best decisions. Thank you.